Oh, God.
I think we're live.
Oh, imagine that.
Had a few technical
Hi,
difficulties,
Justin.
but I think we got it.
All right. Uh-oh, that's not going to work.
Oh, this is great.
Can you hear yourself in the trailer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can. We're going to have to drop that.
Dude, does Jeffrey have me muted?
That's terrible.
Oh.
Okay. It is
He
time.
just hung up on me.
Yeah.
Jack.
All right. Are we going to start this again, or what are we going to do?
We're live.
We're live. All right. Well, then it is time.
Well, we're not going out on the air.
You're not on the air, but you're
We're not on the air.
Yeah, it's time to make this thing happen. So, YouTube folks, we got a little technical glitches going on right now, but we're going to figure it out. And I'm going to press down on this button right here and say good evening and welcome to the North Georgia GMRS Regional Net. Tonight we are live from Studio Vanguard, and we are linked in with the following repeaters. Jeff, which repeaters are we following?
We are following Lookout Mountain, White Oak Mountain, Chattanooga, Fort Mountain, Georgetown, Ottawa, Flagship, Noonan, McDonough, Dallas, Jersey, Columbus, Ocala, Rome, Toccoa, Watkinsville, Lula, Zebulon, and of course we have our VoIP service, Zello.
Man, that's quite a list.
That is quite a list.
Yeah. Seems like it takes longer to get through that list. Tonight, our RF coverage is approximately 147,629.32 square miles. Square kilometers. I was distracted by myself over there. This net takes place every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m. I'd like to thank everyone who's made the North Georgia GMRS the most expansive and active GMRS network in the country.
Still can't hear anything.
And Kate can't hear anything. Your net control tonight is Atlanta 946 WQIR 514. My name is Justin, and
Atlanta 947, WQIR 514. My name's Julie.
I am WRWM 344, Blue Ridge 63, and my name is Mike.
And Atlanta 750, WRMR 367. My name is Jeff, and our studio guest...
Kate can't hear us. It's your turn, Kate.
Oh, my.
All right, well, we're having some technical difficulties. I promise this is not our first time on the air, but we'll get through it.
On the net, you can talk about your day's activities, radio equipment, or anything you think we like to hear. This is a family-based network, so we encourage you to get your family involved. Once the floor is open, it is permissible to address other members of the net by their name or tactical unit number. Your FCC call sign is only required when you sign in or sign out of the net. This week on the net, we're going to be talking about antennas, grounding, and bonding. So this will be a great time for us to bond.
It'll be a bonding experience.
It could be, yes. And so with that, let's find out what's going on in the GMRS radio world with Catch Up with Kate.
Let's reset and we'll turn it over.
This is WRMR 367, Atlanta 751. Kate from high atop Mount Waleski, live in Studio C with this week's Catch Up with Kate, the latest NGGMRS sauce. GMRS news that we can all relish. Great news. Today we have finished the conversion to the new fiber optic internet connection at our Lookout Mountain site. It has been tested and tuned earlier this afternoon. We're looking forward to a much more stable and reliable linking connection with this site moving forward. And now for breaking news. The annual Smith Family North Georgia GMRS Barbecue Gathering at LL Farms will be held this year on Saturday, April 20th. Gates open at 10 a.m. and we have access to the event until 5 p.m. Watch your email for an invitation and much more information on how you can RSVP and details about the event. Let me break. The next Skywarn topic will be about upper synoptic meteorology, whatever that is. More information can be found at noaa.gov/jetstream. We encourage everyone to do the homework, and then we can view together at a common point. Skywarn training nets are for the Chattanooga region only. If you have an interest in Skywarn and are not in the Chattanooga area, find a local Skywarn group to you. Skywarn nets are on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. only on the northern segment of the North Georgia GMRS Network. Materials for discussion and homework can be found by visiting noaa.gov/jetstream. Chattanooga Lunch Bunch will meet on Friday, February 16th, that's tomorrow, at Champy's in East Ridge, located at 6515 Ringgold Road. Reach out to Ronnie, Chat69, for more information about the lunch gathering, or if you have questions about Skywarn training class. The Stockbridge Breakfast Club is gathering on Saturday, February 24th. The location is double secret as seating is limited. If you wish to be a part of the Stockbridge Breakfast Club, use the secret password Molly Ringwald in an email addressed to WRN as in Nancy X 388@gmail.com for directions and more information. Let me break. The 42nd Dalton Amateur Radio Club Hamfest is always held on the fourth Saturday in the month of February. This is a great opportunity to visit many of our favorite radio vendors and explore the Boneyard. We hope you'll visit the Dalton Hamfest on Saturday, February 24th. Gates open at 8 a.m. For more information, search for Dalton Amateur Radio Club on Facebook. If you have any questions, suggestions, or spicy announcements for us to catch up on, send me a note at kate@nggmrs.org. We are North Georgia GMRS Network. And now over to Julie's tips. Good night, everyone. This is Atlanta 751 WRMR 367.
Good evening. This is WQIR 514. My name is Julie, and I'm Atlanta 947 with this week's new user tips and operating procedures segment. This week, I am going to talk about intentional interference. Blowing into your mic, persistent kerchunking, extended dead keys, and feedback are all forms of intentional interference. Intentional because one doesn't do these things accidentally, and interference because these are not welcome things anyone on the network wants to hear. There are other forms of intentional interference, such as keying up with max power whenever someone else keys, trying to override their signal, or playing sounds, recordings, or annoying noises over the network. North Georgia GMRS Network has some tools to defend against such interference, but it takes time to collect enough evidence to have a case we can hand over to the FCC. When we hear interference, we listen for specific tells. We will compare what we hear to regular traffic, and when we have a good comparison, the investigation goes further. If the interference continues, we will make contact. If necessary, we will hand over our recordings, our logs, and our notes to the FCC. Let me break. As As a member of North Georgia GMRS Network, you have a role to play when these people misbehave. First and foremost, do not give the jammer the satisfaction of his efforts. The worst thing we can do is empower that person by acknowledging his actions are having an effect. We should endeavor to continue the use of the network, and rather than say someone keyed on you, mention there was some interference. If the conversation is truly overwhelmed by interference, sign off and come back on the air later. The second thing to do is to note the date and time of the event in an email to support@nggmrs.org, and we will log the event. Include as much information as you can. We can pull the tapes and review these events in the studio environment for careful analysis. This is how we defend our network against intentional interference, and this is how we become the best operators on the nation's largest, most advanced network in the nation. And remember, if you have any questions or suggestions for new user tips and operating procedures, send me a note at julie@nggmrs.org. We are North Georgia GMRS Network, and this is WQIR 514, Atlanta 947. Julie. Good night, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you for those tips, Julie, and thanks for that information. That's good stuff and stuff that we should keep in mind. I think the most important thing to consider out of this is that whenever we do encounter intentional interference, is that we don't acknowledge it, that we ignore it the best that we can. The worst thing we can do is tell someone that, hey, somebody just keyed up on you, because what that does is that empowers the bad actor to continue doing what they're doing. If we behave as though we don't even notice the interference, then they may grow tired of attempting and just stop. If the interference is so bad that we can't continue a conversation, then why fight it? Just sign off and come back a few minutes later. Hopefully they'll give up and move on to other things. So these are just some of the things that we need to keep in mind. But I just want to emphasize that if you do hear somebody behaving badly on the network, don't call them out, don't address them, and don't acknowledge that what they're doing is having an impact on your communications. That just empowers that person to engage even more. So we want to be careful that we don't give them the satisfaction of having an effect on our network. And then, of course, you can report the event to us at support@northgeorgiagmrs.org. And we will log these events, and we will do whatever analysis we're able to at that time, and we'll see what we can come up with. So there are some tools that we have available to help us to identify these people and hopefully put a stop to it. So good stuff. Thank you for that. And with that, I think Jeff, did you have any other announcements or anything that we missed?
Do we want to go a little more in depth about the barbecue from Kate's announcement?
How deep is the barbecue?
Well, they had some pretty deep pans of barbecue last year. I mean, they had a lot of food.
There was a lot of food, and it was very, very good food. So if you haven't been to one of the Smith family barbecue events, you definitely should consider attending this one. The Smith family does request an RSVP so that they have an accurate assessment of how much food to prepare. They're going to make too much food anyway, but let's help them out as best we can with an accurate head count so that we can prepare the right amount of food, and the sides and the snacks and the desserts and all of that. It's just tremendous. It's a lot of effort to put together, but the Smith family will provide this. The venue is at LL Farms. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's a great opportunity for us to hang out and visit and fellowship with our other GMRS members. Let me break. So definitely put that on your calendar. April 20. Gates will open at 10 a.m. and they will close at 5 p.m. So if you're not gone by 5 o'clock, the gates you might not be able to. So be sure that we respect the closing time as well. It shouldn't be a problem. So I think that'll be good. I expect a great turnout, and I look forward to seeing many of you at the event. LL Farms, April 20, Smith Family Barbecue. Look for an email with an invitation and instructions on your RSVP.
I think that about sums it up.
All right. What happened at Lookout Mountain this week?
We had the new fiber optic internet installed and completed just this afternoon, just shortly after lunchtime. So Lookout Mountain is back linked in and should be hearing us this evening, as a matter of fact.
What did we have for internet service there prior to today?
We were using Verizon home internet service, and it was not doing so hot.
Yeah, we did have a number of, in the short time that we've been up on the new tower, we've had a number of interruptions. So it's good that we have a fiber path to that site. Hopefully that'll be more reliable, and we can expect better performance out of that connection. All right.
The folks that rely 100% on Cades Cove obviously can't hear us, but the Cades Cove repeater is currently unlinked with some maintenance issues. Gary is actually heading up there this evening to try to get that resolved either today, tomorrow, at some point in the very near future. But we are aware of the fact that Cades Cove is unlinked, and we're working on that.
No, that's unfortunate. Well, I know that we have a number of members up in that region that enjoy the program. But, well, that's just the nature of radio, I guess. We'll do our best to get that site back up and operating quickly.
I think that's about it for announcements and upcoming events.
All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and continue with our check-ins. We've got a pretty good roster so far, but I think we have a handful more that are out there. And I want to make another opportunity for Zello check-ins. So anyone that would like to check in using the Voice over IP app, often referred to as Zello users only, please call Net Control.
Is Gainesville 417 WRER 451. William in Auburn, Georgia. Be checking in, checking out.
WRXM 922, Gainesville 58, Jonathan and Oakwood, in and out.
RMA 965, Atlanta 964, Richard in Duluth, short time.
That means in and out.
This is Gainesville 43, WRXM 345, David in Auburn, Georgia, checking in, checking out.
You came in off Tacoma.
This is WRXV 696, Dallas 64, Josh in Dallas, checking in and checking out.
Yes. This is, WRXI 755, Case Cove 80. I'll be checking in and checking out.
Excuse me.
This is WRNU 813, Atlanta 931, Scott in Canton. Checking in and checking out.
Uncomfortable pause for Zello check-ins.
We got 3 Zello check-ins in that run. It's Toccoa. I got nothing out of that.
All right, let me go ahead and acknowledge this last round of check-ins. We have some YouTube check-ins I'd like to call out. We have Atlanta 20 Michael in Cartersville. We have Blue Ridge 64 Melissa in Blue Ridge. Also, we had Atlanta 658 McKay and Cumming, all checking in by way of YouTube. Obviously, those are in and outs because we don't have a way of interacting with the YouTube check-ins. Also from Zello, we had Gainesville 417. William in Auburn was in and out. We have Gainesville 58. Jonathan in Oakwood is in and out. Atlanta 964. Richard in Duluth is in and out. Those were our Zello check-ins. Now, it's important to remember when we're taking Zello check-ins, it needs to be Zello check-ins only. The reason for that is sometimes we leave a long pause for Zello check-ins. It can be cumbersome at times. If you're using the app, you can actually get a timeout from trying to use the push-to-talk while someone else is talking, and the timeout penalty can be quite long. So if we key up, every time we key up and someone's trying to key up on Zello, we can cause that timeout penalty to restart. When we call for Zello check-ins and we ask for Zello check-ins, I expect all radio check-ins to wait until we call for radio traffic. So bear that in mind. We also have for check-ins today, we have Gainesville 43. David in Auburn is in and out. Dallas 64. Josh in Dallas was in and out. Cades Cove 80. Eric in Rockwood was in and out. And Atlanta 931, Scott in Canton, also in and out. There was a Toccoa check-in there that we were unable to copy. Just all noise. We saw the Toccoa repeater light up, but we don't know who that was. So those are the check-ins we have at this time. If you tried to check in and we did not call you, it's because we don't have you. So right now, I'm going to call out for any additional Zello check-ins because their opportunity to check in kind of got stepped on. Zello check-ins only, please. Okay, maybe we have them all, but
give them a chance.
all right. Perhaps we have all of our Zello check-ins. So with that, we're going to go ahead and continue with any repeater anywhere. Excuse me. If you'd like to check into the North Georgia GMRS regional net from any repeater other than flagship, I think I said any repeater anywhere. Let's hold off on the flagship traffic for just a moment and let some of these other outlying repeaters check in. We'll come to our home repeater here in just a moment. Any repeater other than flagship, including VoIP check-ins, please call net control now.
I didn't get that.
Is it chat 29?
29. Mark?
Yes.
I don't know.
This is CW40, WRNX 752, checking in and out.
dice.
No? Okay.
It's Chat 700 repeater. That's
Yeah.
WRZQ 398, Atlanta 32. This is Reggie in Snellville, checking in and out.
Mexico, check in Tacoma 25 and Tacoma 26 on the Tacoma machine.
This is WRKJ 453, Chattanooga 69. Check me in and out tonight, guys. I am in Las Vegas. Have a good night.
All right, let me go ahead and acknowledge this round of check-ins. We have Atlanta 3-2. Reggie in Snellville is in and out. We heard CW40. Robert in Nicholson is in and out. Toccoa 2-5. Paul in Toccoa in and out. I'm sorry, he's in. And we have Toccoa 2-6. Donald, also in Toccoa, is in. And we heard Chattanooga 6-9. Ronnie in Las Vegas. Not quite the high roller. We'll call him an average roller. Is in and out tonight. He's probably busy getting ready for Champies luncheon tomorrow.
That's tomorrow.
Is it at noon or 11? Do we know what time that is?
Not off the top of my head, but I can look.
I think they usually meet at high noon.
I'm thinking the Champies. Yeah, I'm not sure. But in any case, if you show up at 11 and no one's there, just hang out for a while. And eventually, folks will show up and really good fried chicken. It's very tasty food. I was able to join in there one time last year, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity again this coming year. So we'll see what happens. Those are the check-ins we have at this time. There was one check-in that we just couldn't pull out of the noise. It was a Chattanooga check-in off the Signal Mountain machine. So if you didn't hear your name, it's because we didn't hear your check-in well enough to be able to pull that out. So Chattanooga check-in, I'm going to make a break right here just for you.
This is WROT 224 Chattanooga 110 checking in. It's Jim from Ringgold.
And he's in. Got him.
Is that the same voice?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
And he came in off of Fort Mountain that time.
The one we missed was Chattanooga 700 repeater.
Yeah.
All right, Chattanooga 110, Jim in Ringgold. We've got you in the log. Appreciate you checking in tonight. Let's go ahead and continue with check-ins from any repeater anywhere, including the flagship machine and all of our outlying repeaters. Also, anyone trying to check in through the VoIP app, we'll try to leave a little break before we close check-ins. There will be an opportunity to check in once again at the end of the program. We'll call for one round of late check-ins near the end of the program. Anyone wishing to check in at this time, Net Control standing by.
This is WRYK 216, Chat 49. Robert from Dalton, Georgia, checking in and out.
This is WRQ G806, Atlanta 557, Ed in Kennesaw, checking in and out. This is WRQW 647. This is Atlanta 637, David in Kennesaw, and please check me in and out. Thank you, sir. Westminster, South Carolina. Checking in, checking out.
Nick and Carl, this is Code 25. Can you, my mind wasn't keeping up with my mouth a while ago. It's been a Monday all day. Can you check 25 and 26 out? We're destinated. Thanks for the ride along.
All right. Dakota 25. Yeah, you got them. Okay.
Is BRZT 646, Atlanta 933, Dwayne in Canton, checking in and checking out.
Couldn't make much of that out.
Yeah, that's about the best we get out of Isaac.
Yeah.
He usually relays his wife in too, which is 291.
You want me to put her in? Or no?
Should we put 291 in there too? He usually does relay her in.
I don't know if I heard that this time though. Yeah, let's just leave it like it is. We get enough real check-ins. We don't need to pad our books with fake ones.
Pushing 70 right now.
This is Atlanta
I'm not
73,
that old.
Ed in Lawrenceville, KF 9860. I'll be hanging around for a while.
If he'd have waited a few, he could have checked in at 73. All right, we have an outstanding roster to get started with, but let me acknowledge this last round. We have Chattanooga 49, Robert in Dalton is in and out. Atlanta 557, Ed in Kennesaw, in and out. Atlanta 637, Dave in Kennesaw, in and out. Gainesville 57, Richard in Westminster, South Carolina, is in and out. Atlanta 933, Dwayne in Canton, is in and out. Dallas 290, Isaac in Dallas is in and out. And we heard Atlanta 73, Ed in Lawrenceville is in with us this evening. Toccoa 25 and 26, we heard your traffic, and we've got you marked in and out. Appreciate you checking in tonight. Those are the check-ins we have at this time, so we're going to go ahead and get things started. And if you missed your opportunity to check in, stick around. We'll call for one more round of check-ins before we close the net. So this week we're talking about antennas and grounding and bonding. What is bonding? What does that refer to? What is bonding all about?
Bonding is going to be how we tie our grounds and our ground system together. So the connections that you make at the ground rod and any other splice points that you make from possibly a grounding strap on your coax shield to the tower, or a grounding strap from your coax to a ground rod directly, all those kinds of things, those connections are going to be what we refer to as bonding.
So bonding is just a generic word that really refers to connecting or a physical connection. So when we bond our grounding system, we want to bond the coax shield. We want to bond that ground to the same grounding rod that we bond the mast or tower to, and that we bond our radios to. And there also needs to be a bonded connection between our ground rod and our radio equipment and the building's grounding system for the electrical system. So that may be a ground wire over to your meter base or to the breaker panel, whatever means you have available to you to get a connection, a bond from the grounding system for our radio equipment back to the building's electrical ground. Let me break. And, you know, in an automotive application, we may bond our NMO connector to a negative electrical point on our vehicle. Maybe we would run a wire from that NMO down to the frame and bond it there. Maybe we would run that wire all the way back to the battery on the negative side and bond it there. Or maybe we just count on the coax, because oftentimes that's good enough in an automotive environment. And we can get away with just using the shield on our coax to the antenna mount as our bonding mechanism for that connection. And of course, in a handheld, bonding is a little bit different, because we're not really making a hard physical connection, but we are making a capacitive coupled connection with our handy talkie. When we hold that and we key up with that radio is being capacitively connected to our body, and that serves as an extension of or counterpoise to the antenna that's on the radio. So radio will work, an HT will work without being held. You can connect it to a repeater controller, and you can stick it in a box, and that radio is going to work even though it's not capacitively coupled to a body, but it will gain some efficiency from that connection. So that's those are the various kinds of electrical bonding. And of course, grounding is just securing our station to a reliable ground system. Typically, it's going to be a dedicated ground rod, and typically that's going to be located very near either our radio transceiver or our antenna mast, or hopefully both, because we do want to keep that coax run as short as possible. You don't want to run the coax all the way across the house and then outside and then up a mast. You really want to try to get as short a run as possible to be able to get that to minimize the loss in your coax. So that grounding system should be located very near that mast, and should incorporate a bond to the mast, to the antenna, which may be the same thing. The mast may be the bond to your antenna. And of course, we also want to bond to our radio equipment in the shack. The other thing that we haven't really talked about is bonding to the polyphaser. And Jeff, what the heck is a polyphaser?
Let's break and...
Oh, I thought you had your foot on it too.
So a polyphaser is actually a brand name for a device known as a lightning arrestor. Kind of like calling a Kleenex, which is actually a facial tissue, and Kleenex is the brand.
Are there lightning cops? How do you arrest lightning?
I don't know. That's a good point.
What do lightning handcuffs look like?
So a lightning arrestor is going to give the energy on the center conductor of your coax a path to ground, so that it does not use your radio as a path to ground. So the polyphaser is going to dump the energy, whether it be static electricity that's built up from a fiberglass antenna in the wind, or it could be a near miss for lightning, maybe a tree on the property or something of that, and the energy is dissipating through the air coming down your antenna and your coax. We need that energy to go somewhere other than our radio and into our house. So by grounding the shield of the coax, that's going to give us a path to ground on the outside of the coax, and the polyphaser is going to give us a path to ground on the center conductor of the coax.
So, that's an important consideration, because, we often think of, lightning. If lightning strikes your antenna or your house, it's going to blow up your world, and probably it will. But lightning doesn't have to make a direct strike to be destructive. There is so much energy in a lightning bolt. It can strike 100 yards away and still induce dangerous voltages in your building's wiring system. And in your radio's antenna system. So even though that lightning strike is indirect and is maybe, on the other side of your neighbor's place, that still carries a lot of energy. And that energy can be induced into your antenna system, even though it's not a direct strike. The hope is that the lightning arrestor will be able to collect that energy and shunt that energy to ground. If you take a direct strike, all bets are off. Our hope is that everything will work as intended and that energy will go to ground, but all too many times we've seen direct strikes do things that are just unexpected. The energy goes where it wants.
Yeah, lightning is unpredictable no matter how much you prepare for it. So all we can do is prepare for the best and then hope for the best, because there's not much we can do to protect against a direct hit.
We often hear the phrase that electricity takes the path of least resistance, but the truth is a little bit different. The truth is that lightning takes every path. Let me break. I said that incorrectly. The truth is that electricity takes every path to ground. So what that really means is that everything that is energized electrically is going to seek a path to ground. And you may have a more resistive path to ground, and you may have a less resistive path to ground. The majority of the current is going to follow that less resistive path, but not all of it. And so any path to ground will carry energy, and our hope is that we can divert enough energy through the polyphaser, through the lightning arrestor, to avoid damaging our radios. And that's what the goal here is. But more importantly, it doesn't have to be a high energy lightning strike. It can be something as simple as the wind blowing across your antenna, and your antenna collecting static electricity from the wind that moves across it, and a little bit of motion, and all those electrons collecting and accumulating to the point where they're able to jump the gap. So the lightning arrestor hopefully has a smaller gap than the semiconductors in our radios, and
that's the hope anyways.
That's the hope. So that lightning, that static electricity, that high energy event will be dissipated by our lightning arrestor rather than our radio. And so that's the point of grounding. And of course the antenna system is what we radiate with. And there's many varieties. There's many types. You might have the little 6-inch mag mount antennas, the quarter waves that we can stick on our cars. We have, the Comet 712 was one of my favorite antennas. It's a very, very good GMRS antenna. And lots of things in between. And, of course, the DB420s that we use on our repeaters. Very, very efficient, a very, very sensitive antenna. What a great set of ears you can build a radio station with an antenna with those folded dipoles.
Well, the other interesting fact for those that didn't know about the DB420s that we use on the repeater sites is those are DC grounded antennas.
What does that mean?
So the antenna itself has a direct path to ground through the mast of the antenna body itself and through its connection points to the tower. So fiberglass antennas like the Comet 712, and most of us use some form of a fiberglass antenna at our houses, those don't have a direct path to ground by proxy because they're not made out of metal. They're made out of fiberglass, which is the outside tube that the radiating element, easy for me to say, is encased in. So the element is actually inside. Whereas a DB420 antenna, the folded dipoles are made out of metal, and those are the elements, which is connected to the mast and then connected to the legs of the tower. So they always have a good, strong, solid connection and path to ground with the radiating elements on those DC grounded antennas that, in most cases, we don't have that luxury with our home stations.
Here's a fun fact. And something that I rarely see mentioned, but those homemade copper pipe J-pole antennas are also DC grounded antennas. So if you affix that antenna to a steel mast, and then you have a good ground on that steel mast, you have a DC grounded system. So you have a direct low impedance path to ground through that antenna system, even without the polyphaser. But I still recommend the polyphaser because you can still pick up static electricity through your feed lines and still take a hit that way. But that's a good way to go if you're concerned about a lightning strike.
And J-poles are a whole different animal. In my brain, electrically, it doesn't make sense how that even works. It should be a direct short.
That's right. That's right.
But that's a different rabbit hole to go down a different day.
But they do work, and they can be very effective antennas. And so a lot of people recommend them. You know, the Ed Fong J-pole is a little bit different, and I wouldn't consider that a DC grounded antenna for a couple of reasons. One, they're typically installed inside of a plastic pipe. So now we're back to the same mechanical scenario as the fiberglass antenna. And two, the way that the Ed Fong J-pole is constructed is very, very different. And even though you have basically a grounded conductor through most of that antenna, that's just not the same as a piece of copper pipe fastened directly to a steel mast. So, results may vary.
Yeah.
Let's break. So with that as a basis, Jeff, is there anything else that we should cover before we go to the roster?
I think we should go to the roster instead of trying to make people drink from a fire hose. Let them process that and maybe ask questions as we go.
All right, then. Well, let's do that. And so first on our list is Atlanta 420, William in Roswell. Now, I know that William has been on the roof and various other places doing goofy antenna installations, experiments, etc. William, what do you have set up these days?
Tell you, I'm going to be listening very close tonight because you guys got some good information. Actually, my antenna mast is located inside the attic there, but I do have vent ridges that are on there. So I would like any advice on grounding of any type of attic antennas or even television antennas or radio antennas that are internal to the house there. I do put surge protectors for the power source, but you are correct. Electrons can collect with close strikes on antennas even inside the house, especially if you have openings that allow free air movement there. I am familiar with bonding with automobiles or with trucks in specific. It was told to me about mounting an antenna on the truck bed if you've got like a line or anything else like that to try to get a metal-to-metal contact and perhaps even run a wire that connects the cab to the rear of the truck there to make sure your ground plane is settled in that. But I'm going to be listening more, but I'll let you and Jeff answer my question there on internal antennas and what to do with those. Over.
I counted 6. All right. Well, the attic-mounted antenna, I think, there's some great advantages to that. Of course, the one downside is that there is some loss that you're going to experience just getting through the roof, through the asphalt shingles, through the plywood decking, through that. And, in UHF radio frequencies, we often talk about line of sight. Well, the first thing you do when you put an antenna in the attic is you put an obstruction in between your receiver and the faraway transmitter. So that's going to elevate your noise floor a little bit. The elevated noise on your transmit is probably, it might not even be measurable. Maybe it is, but it's not going to be significant. You're going to be able to transmit through that roof pretty well. Maybe unless it's a steel roof.
Yeah, tin roof or a steel roof might cause problems.
That may be an issue. But for the typical house setup, that should work pretty well. So if you're willing to accept a little bit higher noise floor on your receive, mounting in the attic is a good idea. And a couple of things happen when you mount that antenna in the attic. You protect that antenna from the elements. So your fiberglass isn't going to be attacked constantly by the ultraviolet from the sun. Your electrical connections are protected from rain and most moisture. You have a much more pleasant environment for an antenna to operate in. There shouldn't be a lot of wind blowing across the attic, so static electricity, although is not completely ruled out, its likelihood is diminished significantly. So I don't think you'll be accumulating huge static charges on an antenna mounted in your attic. A lightning, there's really no difference whether that antenna is inside or outside, because like we said, it's not necessarily the direct strike that we're concerned with here. It's the induced voltage from a nearby strike that can put energy into your antenna system, which is not just your antenna, but also your whole antenna system. So a nearby lightning strike can destroy your equipment, even though it didn't come anywhere near the house. So I would recommend that even though the antenna is mounted in the attic, that you make every provision for grounding that attic-mounted antenna that you would if you're mounting it outside near the chimney or off the eaves of your house. Whatever you would do outside, do the same thing inside. Of course, you can't drive a ground rod from your attic. You're going to have to go outside to do that. But find the shortest path you can. Make the least number of bends in your ground wire that you can. Let me break. And like I said, make that short. Make the fewest bends. Make wide bends, because if you make a sharp bend, that becomes a high impedance to a lightning strike. So you want to make wide sweeping bends in any of your ground connections, and get a ground rod driven as close as you can, and bond your radio system to that same grounding system. That's important too. That we don't want to create a path through the coax into your radio and then to ground. So any energy that makes it to your radio hopefully is coming in on the coax, on the shield side of the coax. And if we ground that radio chassis, we can get that energy away from your electronics quickly before they smoke the innards.
Well, I think the other thing to consider here too, especially with antennas in attics, is grounding also helps us with RF noise, both on receive and transmit. So if we give that antenna system a path to ground, it can help minimize some of that RF noise that your antenna may be picking up, that in this case is unwanted noise. So we can shunt that noise to ground and get the signals we're looking for in and out. So even in the attic, grounding has multiple benefits besides just the common, well, it's in the attic, I don't need lightning protection. So there are other benefits as well as necessities to grounding your antenna system even in the attic. Did I miss anything?
Well, let's see if William has any comments.
I think you've given me something to definitely think about. I think I did lose one fiberglass antenna right after with amateur there. It was using another radio there, and I think it did mess up the antenna there. So I might have gotten collection from a close lightning strike, but my Yagi antenna did survive though. It didn't have any problems with my GMRS radios there. So again, I'll be listening to other suggestions and things that people have got in there, other ideas of how they've made it easy to ground. I don't know if I'm running it through the chimney stack, or what would be the best route to run it outside into the ground from an attic position there. Over.
6 more.
That's awesome.
All right. So that's our drinking game. When William is on the air, we count the number of theirs that he says. All right, William. Well, yeah, and I guess that's the concern that we have, is that we're not really protected against lightning when we're in the attic. It seems like we would be, but we're just not. And it's not the direct strike that because that's really rare. I mean, that's not something that happens truly very often, unless your name is Houston. But that's another story.
Yeah, that's not.
But
Or flagship.
Or flagship. Seems like we take a lot of strikes at flagship. But that is the consideration, is we want to be protected against those lightning strikes, even if the antenna is in the attic, because it's not necessarily a direct strike. It could be an indirect strike, and it could be some distance from you and still be able to induce some crazy voltages into your antenna system. So, and like Jeff says, you know, the noise floor can really change when you properly ground your antenna system. So that is also an important consideration. All right, who's next?
Atlanta 355, Damon in Canton. Damon, did you have any questions or comments for the net tonight with regard to antennas, grounding, or bonding?
No, I don't really have. I think the first caller pretty well summed up my questions as well. That's basically what I'm doing. I know some guys will just unhook their antenna systems when it comes a storm, but it seems to me it would be better to ground it than to go through all that trouble. And then, you know, a storm's going to sneak in every now and then when you're not ready for it.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you could have, you know, run to the store out for afternoon with the wife to go have lunch and do some shopping, and that storm could have rolled in while you're not home. And if your antenna system is not properly prepared and you're not there to unhook it, it could be all over at that point. So it is best to go ahead and do things correctly, and in this case, protect your investment. Between the radio, the coax, the antenna, I mean, all of us have a fair amount of money tied up in our station, so
not to mention the time.
That's right. Time as well, and installation and those kinds of things. So to not protect your investment with a little bit of grounding and a lightning arrestor, I mean, all that work could be for naught, and damage can happen quickly in less than a second, and that's all it takes. It's all done.
Well, that's one consideration. Another thing to think about is you may want to be able to operate during the storm. You might want to be able to monitor if there is severe storm activity and see if anybody is calling out for assistance. You might want to be able to just listen, and particularly if you have an amateur radio, in addition to your GMRS radio, you might want to monitor the 2-meter nets and listen to some of the Skywarn activity in your area. So having a station that's prepared for weather events is very important. And disconnecting your antenna when you think a storm is going to pass through, you can do that, but you limit yourself in a number of ways. And as Jeff pointed out, what if you're at the store? What if you're not home when it happens? And what if you've forgotten to disconnect your antenna and you've left for the weekend, and a big old storm blows through, and now you have lightning damage to look forward to when you come home. So proper grounding is very important. We all have to start off someplace. So if it's not the first thing you do, I get it. But as you work into the radio craft and radio hobby, that is an important consideration you should definitely be thinking of, particularly for base stations.
Well, the other thing we didn't talk about too much either is the operator's safety. Professor Pete told me a story one time where the gentleman had a metal desk set up in his Radio Shack, and static electricity built up, came down the antenna, came down the coax, and actually energized the desk. Luckily, at the time, he wasn't touching it, so he didn't get shocked, but I mean, if you had your arms on the desk and were actively engaged in that radio station, somebody could get hurt.
Yeah, and it's not only grounding, in that situation, it's not only grounding from the antenna system, but I mean, you could have a fault in a power supply. Any of a number of things could happen that could cause that metal desk to be energized. If I had a metal desk, I would certainly want that to be grounded. And, you know, by grounding a large metal object that's near your radio equipment, I think that's going to go a long way towards helping with your noise floor. Let's break. All right, Damon, did you have anything else for us?
No, I'm just mainly going to listen in and learn. And I wasn't really familiar with a polyphaser, so I was really paying attention to that. So it's a live and learn type thing. So I will be listening to add to my radio vocabulary, so to speak.
Very good. Well, since you brought it up, let's talk just a little bit about the polyphaser. There are a number of different brands of lightning protection that you can get. And like, for instance, I think for under $20, you can buy a Workman brand lightning arrestor. That is a nice idea, but that's really about all it is. It's a kind of a get what you pay for scenario. I recommend polyphaser because of all the commercial radio sites that I've been to, every one of them use polyphaser. I've never seen anything else. It's always been polyphaser at commercial radio sites. And these are sites that are on the air 24/7 in every kind of weather. These are sometimes remote sites that no one is at. So it's not like somebody can just disconnect the coax or change a lightning arrestor if one blows up. This is equipment that is meant to be operational through the storm, through whatever the event is, and still be there and ready to play at the conclusion. So polyphaser is what I see in all of these industrial commercial environments, and they are expensive, but they're not out of reach. So I would suggest if the inexpensive lightning arrestor is all you can afford, just save your money and wait until you can buy a polyphaser. And if that means you have to disconnect your coax for a season until you have the money to buy the better device, that's what I would advise, because I think you get a false sense of security from these cheap devices, and it may cost you a radio if we compromise on the lightning protection. That's just one area that I really feel quality is paramount.
Well, I mean, the proof is kind of in the pudding. We know for a fact here recently that Flagship took a lightning strike to the receive antenna, and that polyphaser did its job. There was zero damage to any of the RF equipment in the cabinet because the polyphaser stopped it. We didn't lose a repeater. We didn't lose a PA. We didn't lose a preamp. So, I mean, the proof is kind of in the pudding. Another brand that's a little less expensive but are super sensitive to moisture is the Alpha Delta. Those are decent lightning arresters, but if you plan on putting them outdoors, you have to get them out of the weather because they have a little capsule that's replaceable, and it is very common to get moisture inside of those devices, and when you get moisture inside of them, your SWR shoots up through the roof because you're trying to transmit through a fish tank.
Well, and I believe that the polyphaser is sensitive to that as well. Any lightning arrestor should be protected from the weather and from the elements. So typically the lightning arresters are mounted either outdoors in an enclosure or indoors just as soon as the coax breaks through the wall. Let's break. And let's go ahead and move on. Mike, you want to pick up a few?
Yeah.
Now that you woke up from your nap.
All right, very good. Well, we're going to keep the show rolling along and get to some more check-ins. So thank you, Damon, for chiming in with your questions, and hopefully you found that valuable. Next on the log, we had Atlanta 605, Michael and Cumming, who was in and out. We had Atlanta 610, David in Marietta, in and out. After that was Atlanta 138, Robert in Auburn, in and out. And that'll bring us to Dallas 37, David at Bowdoin Junction, who's in tonight. David, did you have any comments, questions about antennas and bonding or grounding, any of the above?
That was with the double. He might have been in and out.
Oh.
We don't know.
I want to go to Houston next.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, David, your check-in when we heard you at the beginning was overlapping over a double, so you may have relayed to us that you were in and out. We're going to go ahead and show you as out in the log, but thanks for checking in. Next, we'll go to Atlanta 780, Houston, and Austell. Houston, what comments do you have or experiences would you like to share with the net tonight?
Hi, good evening, Net Control, Atlanta 780. Well, I can attest to lightning strikes, as I know a lot of you know. The house got hit by lightning and done a lot of damage, but the one thing that I can say that did me a lot of good was the battery backup systems that I had hooked up and had all my radios plugged into, and I did not lose one power supply or radio, but I did lose 5 battery backups. I still need to do a lot of groundwork on my tower. It is grounded, but not as well as I want it. But yeah, I agree with grounds, but usually when lightning comes around, I disconnect all the antennas and sometimes unplug them, but I do have new battery backups, so I don't worry too much about that part. But grounds are great, and poly bases are even greater.
You chime in on that?
Well, good stuff, Houston. And I know that you do have some personal experience with lightning, and unfortunately, that experience wasn't good. Took a long time to get your house put back together after that event, and that's unfortunate. Wish that had been a little smoother recovery, but you're back now, and glad to know that that your station is back up and in operation. So yeah, grounding on the tower, you know, in Houston, we all have to start off with something. So, you know, we use what you have, and if you don't have all of the right stuff at the beginning, it doesn't mean we can't come on the air with it, but it does mean that we should endeavor as time goes on. You know, we save our pennies and we accumulate the equipment and the tools and materials that we need to finish that task. So if you need to drive another ground rod or make some more bonding, acquire some more copper wire for grounding purposes, you know, all that stuff takes money and time, and so, you know, I guess my point is, you know, we have to start off with what we have, but we need to know that we need to work towards a proper grounding system at some point. So, and it sounds like you're on your way to that. Thanks for your comments tonight, Houston, and glad to have you on the air again.
Thank you, sir. We do appreciate it. But one last word. You're right about lightning. It takes its own track. Where it hit on the gutter on the front of my house, it blew all 4 gutters off. Grounded through the gas lines, grounded through the water lines. It even hit the back fence and welded my lock chain together where the gate locks. And quite a few places around the fence. So, beware of lightning.
Okay. He finally got back in his house just a couple of months ago.
All right, Houston. Well, thank you for that, and thanks for that warning. And like I say, I know that you've experienced that personally, and that can be tough stuff, especially after your experience. But all right, where are we at? Where are we at now, Mike? I've lost our sequence.
Well, we are at BR549. Uncle Mike up around Cherry Log, who's who's checked in and out with us tonight, but as I understand it, is tuned into the live stream. So Uncle Mike will wave at you on the live stream here, and we'll keep going. After that, we had a guest check in, Larry from Chatsworth, WSAI 340. Larry, if you are still with us tonight, we'd love to call on you and welcome you to join into the net with any comments or questions that you have regarding antennas, grounding, and bonding.
Yes, WSAI 340 Chatsworth, and actually checked. Yeah, I don't think you heard the out on it.
All right, we've got you as in and out. Thanks for that correction. Yeah, we did have a rough copy on you. We'll go ahead and update the log accordingly. Thanks for joining us tonight. Next, we heard Chattanooga 5-3. Doug and Hickson was in and out, followed by Dallas 2-0. David in southwest Paulding County. David, we've got you in tonight. So what questions or knowledge would you like to share with the net regarding antennas, grounding, and bonding?
Good evening, guys. Well, the main thing is just trying to, once you get it set, try not to mess with it too much for the antennas. If it's something that's in with the system, don't start adjusting things right off the bat. Just wait a little while, wait a couple of days, see if it straightens up before you start making all kind of adjustments. The other thing is I was curious, if you was to do like a temporary, like an ed fog hanging up around your property, and you're just going to have like a pass-through through the window, how would you go about trying to attach a ground to that?
We did that in the former Studio B.
Not gracefully, though.
No, but we did it.
Oh, it's a great question. Jeff, you want to...
I think we'll throw that one to Justin.
Well, it's funny because Jeff was just commenting about the temporary Studio B when we were operating out of that tiny, tiny bedroom. Our operating space was probably about a third of what we have right now.
Wow. It was tight.
It was tight in that space. But we used in that case, we used a window pass-through, which was a piece of 1x4 that had holes drilled in it for N-style barrel connectors, and the barrel connectors were mounted in that board. But we also drilled a hole and just ran a ground rod right through that hole.
Well, not the rod, the wire.
The wire, that's right. So there were actually two wires that came in, and we made a loop underneath that desk. So that was bonded. Both sides of that were bonded to the rod that was just outside the window. There were other ground rods that were driven near the masts, and all of that was bonded together with one continuous run of number 6 copper. All of the various rods were bonded together, and all of the masts were bonded to those ground rods as well. So it's just a matter of figuring out how to do that. Now, if you're talking about just laying a piece of coax through the corner of the window and closing the window down on it, without crushing it, you can get a piece of number 6 wire in right beside that pretty easily. If you're not going to use a pass-through and you're going to try to drill through the wall in some way, number 6 copper is about 3/16 of an inch in diameter. A 1/4 inch drilled hole will easily pass a piece of number 6 ground wire through it. So there's a number of things that you can do. It's just a matter of, what is your arrangement? Is this going to be permanent, or is this going to be something temporary? So if it's temporary, you could even do something like a piece of braided wire so that you could close the window on it. But there's a number of ways to bond your station and protect your equipment from the elements and from that lightning and or static electricity.
And the other thing to consider too in that scenario, if it's going to be mildly permanent, in other words, for a couple of months or whatever, don't forget security. if you're going to have a pass-through in the window, make sure you get some way of securing that window and not leave yourself susceptible to possible forced entry from an easy target with an open window. So a lot of things to consider when using a pass-through type device in your window, but grounding is just one of them. You all right down there?
Yeah, this silly phone is blowing up, and I kind of need to pay attention because we got some trouble on the railroad. But
well, we can take over. Go ahead.
It's making a lot of noise, so
they're looking for you.
Yeah, they are. But in any case, and that was another thing that we. Oh, it's time to break. That was another thing that I kind of wanted to touch on was that temporary arrangement. Even though we're doing things temporarily, if we have the means to do it well and to do it right, we should do that. And we joked about, how haphazard the setup was in that temporary Studio B, and it truly was. It was meant to be temporary, and it was meant to be removable so that that space could be restored back to the bedroom that it is right now. So sometimes that limits how you can install or how you would install. But if you're looking at a permanent space and you're willing to drill a hole through the wall, then there's a number of ways that you can do that. One is you can just drill a hole through the wall. But you can also take into account that there may be some other options available, such as maybe mounting a cabinet or a box on the outside of the house so that that hole through the wall comes into a convenient place to mount polyphasers and a ground bus and have a very low impedance path to ground right there next to your polyphasers that you can also bond through the wall, back to your Radio Shack, and you have all your radios and computers and anything that has a metal chassis should be grounded to that ground system. So your power supply, things like that, should all be bonded. Not just the radio, but really everything.
Yeah, power supply is commonly forgotten.
Often is, yes. So, good stuff, David. Did you have anything else?
No, sir. That pretty much sums it up. I was just curious, and as you were discussing it, pretty much was figuring out it'd be easier to just go ahead and mount a smaller Pelican box on the outside and run another polyphaser out there. Even though it's temporary, it's something that I can move around and have set up like that. Don't skimp on safety is one of the main things I'm hearing, and I agree 100%. Just wanted to pass on a little note. This coming up Monday is the Rabbit Hole at 7 p.m. and we're going to be discussing canning and water bathing and things like that. So just tune in this coming up Monday at 7 p.m. for the Rabbit Hole. Appreciate it, guys.
What is water bathing? What is that? I think I know what canning is, but what is water bathing?
A water bath is how you would process acidic foods, more or less tomatoes, your jams and jellies and things like that. But for the other main things is what we started off with a water bath, but realized that you were very, very limited in what you could do with that. So we quickly bought the canner and moved on from there. We still keep the water bath, but I can't tell you the last time we have actually water bathed something. But it's mainly for anything acidic, high in acid.
Well, very good stuff. Well, I guess, that is just a teaser as to what we can learn this coming Monday night on the Rabbit Hole Net. So if you have any questions about canning or water bathing and the kind of foods that's related to, make notes and tune in Monday night. Early check-ins starting at 7. The Rabbit Hole Net will begin at 7:30. And is Mom going to have a contribution Monday night?
Yes, sir. Mom's Times will be happening then, but you'll have to tune in to find out what she's going to talk about.
Just leaving us in suspense.
Yeah, there's no telling what she's going to say. All right. Well, that's fantastic. And another great reason to tune in Monday night. We'll find out what Mom has to say, and we'll go with that. So where are we at with this, Jeff? I'm lost in the log.
It looks like we have the rest. I've lost my mouse. Oh, there it is. Looks like we have the rest of the Loomis family as in and out. We have Dallas 2-1, Miss Lisa. We have Dallas 2-2, Seth, and Dallas 2-3, Belinda. All in and out, all from southwest Paulding County. Imagine that. Which brings us to Atlanta 256, Chuck in Dawsonville. Chuck, you said you were in and out, but you know you're not going to get away with that. Do you have any questions or comments for the net tonight?
Now, how many pigeons did he forge?
I don't know how many pigeons he forged, but I don't know what that has to do with antennas or grounding. Let's find out.
Good evening, guys. Yes, I am finally back home from Pigeon Forge, where it was nothing but cold and wet. And it's nice here because it's cool and dry. A couple of questions I might have, or you can elaborate a little bit about the polyphaser. Is that something that you can put at the base of the antenna and attach your coax to it, or do you need to cut your coax somewhere else and add a polyphaser? I've had both of my GMRS antenna in the attic. Haven't had any problems, but I have been thinking about attaching some number 6 to a polyphaser and going to the number 6 house ground that happens to be up there for my sub panel break. Adding a 2-meter antenna up there. The next question would be, can you combine the same number 6 ground to both antennas and the house ground? Other than that, I think it would look kind of funny with a number 6 ground coming out the back of my radio. So I haven't heard anybody say where to put this ground up for attic folks, and there's lots of us attic folks on the network now. How's that for a little offer on the net?
Well, that's a couple of great points, Chuck, and lots to unpack there. So let's start off with having a second antenna in the attic for your 2-meter radio. Your bonding to the household ground system is what the NEC requires, and there's a couple of really good reasons for doing that. The first one is that we're going to establish a base ground voltage level throughout the entire house. So what that really means is, if you drive a ground rod on one end of your house and you drive a ground rod on the other end of your house, and you run a wire between them without connecting that wire, you can measure a voltage across those two ground rods. So they're both grounded, and they're not really producing electricity, but there is a difference in potential for ground across that distance. So by bonding those two separate grounding systems together, we establish that everything is at the same potential. Ground reference becomes 0 regardless of where you are within that system. So that's one of the reasons why we want to have our antennas grounded to their own ground, but we also want to have that grounding system bonded to the house's electrical ground. So one of the things that you want to consider when you're routing a ground really for anything is, we often talk about the path of least resistance, but I'm going to change that up a little bit, and I'm going to say we want to establish a path of low impedance. So there's a huge difference and a subtle difference. It's the same but different. Impedance and resistance. Resistance is a way of measuring resistance to current in direct current systems. And impedance is kind of the same measurement, but it's a little different animal when we're talking about alternating current. Let's break. Most lightning strikes consist mostly of high-frequency AC energy. And that energy happens to be oftentimes in the 400 to 500 megahertz range. What else operates in that range?
I think we are right now.
GMRS radio.
That's right.
So our systems just happen to be conveniently tuned to be very happy to accept lightning-induced energy. So we want to make a low impedance path to ground from our antenna systems so that any energy that our antenna collects from a lightning strike will happily take that path instead of that already conveniently tuned path through our radios. So when you consider that, can you bond to the electrical wire that's already in your attic? Yeah, you can bond to that. But that shouldn't necessarily be your path to the grounding system for your antennas. So you could run a wire from a ground rod up into your attic to your antenna base, and then let that wire continue on and bond to your household electrical system.
Which would then give you equal ground potential.
Exactly. It sets your potential the same throughout the entire grounding system in the house. The other thing that does is that actually will serve to lower your impedance. If you only have one connection to ground, you'll have a much higher impedance to ground than if you have two. So you really do a huge benefit to yourself by utilizing that household ground in your radio system by bonding to it. And so in talking about a second antenna mounted in your attic, can you use the same ground for that second antenna as the first one? Yeah, you can do that. Should you? You probably should use a separate ground. But again, we got to start somewhere. So if it's a matter of what material you have on hand and we can get one done, let's do the one and use that to ground both antennas. But as the time and the means become available, I recommend you run a separate ground wire for that second antenna so that we have the lowest possible impedance for both of those antenna mounts in the attic. Did that cover the question, and did I leave anything out?
No, I think you covered it. But well, did you cover where to put the polyphaser? Where would you put it on the coax line?
Well, I think Jeff has built an excellent example of how to do that on his station high atop Mount Waleski by installing a weather-tight box just outside of the house that houses his lightning arresters and his grounding system.
So in a normal circumstance, when the antenna is outdoors, we either want the polyphasers just before we enter the building in some kind of waterproof enclosure, or just inside of the building. So just inside or just outside that entryway wall where the coax comes into the building. In your case, though, it gets a little tricky because the whole system is inside the building, including the antenna. In your case, probably putting the polyphaser up into the attic, so you'd have a short whip going from the polyphaser to the antenna, and then obviously your polyphaser would be grounded, and then the rest of the coax going from the polyphaser down the wall to your radio. I think that would be the best scenario for the attic folks, unless you have a different opinion.
No, I think that's a great recommendation, and I would just add that I've been to a number of commercial radio sites, and in all of them I see either of those scenarios. Either there's a cabinet mounted to the house with polyphasers and grounding system inside that cabinet, much like Jeff has done at his house, or the coax is terminated just after it enters the structure with a polyphaser within the first foot or so, and the grounding done just inside. So either of those scenarios is the right place and the right situation. Yours is just a little bit different in the attic, and I think coming off of the antenna with a whip into a polyphaser and then down to your station is really the best you can do in that situation. Of course, every situation is a bit of a compromise, but I think that again, the goal is to have a low impedance path for any of that energy to escape our antenna system and get to ground.
I think that's about it. What do you say, Chuck?
I say you covered it. I say you covered it all. And the nice thing about when they built these, they put, because the sub panels are on either side of the house, the main and the sub panel, so they have 3 ground rods in the foundation on both sides of the house, and they run the ground cable from the sub panel side over to the main. So it's pretty tied together. But if I take a lightning hit, there's gas up there with a gas.
Might blow your gutters off.
My gas heater for the house. I don't think I'm going to worry too much about a radio if that kind of goes. You know what I mean? But anyways, you did cover it all, and that's awesome. Thank you.
All right, Chuck, it's my turn to ask you a question. I'm going to pick on you a little bit here. So, kind of a pop quiz. How do we measure how good our ground is for our station?
And that would be a very good question, one I cannot answer, but for me.
So ideally for our ground, we would prefer to use a ground resistance meter, which is a very expensive tool that you probably only need to ever use once, maybe twice if you make a change. So it's not worth the investment to buy a brand new one for just one-time use at your house. But if you find one cheap at a ham fest out in the boneyard, or maybe you know somebody who can borrow one from, ideally on our stations we are looking for 5 ohms or less to ground at any given point, which again goes back to equal playing field and equal potential throughout the whole grounding system at any given point.
Yeah, and I believe that the NEC specifies 10 ohms or less. So we're looking for better ground than the electric utility wants.
Correct.
But in Chuck's scenario, where you have a grounding system that's built into the slab of the house, that's often referred to as a UFER ground, and that's going to be a super low impedance ground system. So I don't know that you can do much better than that.
I know there is other ways of measuring ground resistance without a ground resistance meter, but may have to do some digging on that too.
Yeah, we do it with a lantern battery. You clamp a lead to a known good ground, and through the lantern battery, and then a voltmeter, and you're just looking for voltage on anything that should be grounded. And if you find a voltage on anything that should be grounded, then you have a potential difference between that and the ground that you secured to. So you have to have a known good ground in order for that system to work. But that's a method that we use on a railroad to look for grounds, because all of our circuits have to be isolated from ground.
So there you have it. Ground resistance meter is ideal, but there is other homemade ways of doing it and figuring it out to make sure you do have a good low resistance or impedance past the ground.
You really want both.
Right. All right, Chuck, how'd we do?
Well, I think I inspired a lot of information to come back to me here. Thank you guys. You guys did great. Awesome. It's good to be back home. Good to hear the net again. And I'll let you move on to others. But thank you guys. Mike, Justin, Jeff, yep. Thank you very much.
All right, Chuck. Well, with that, we're going to continue on, and we're going to move on to Gainesville 44. Joe in Cleveland. Joe is in and out with us tonight, and that'll move us on to Atlanta 261, Scott in Holly Springs. Also in and out. Also, we heard Atlanta 31, Ron in Ackworth, in and out. I believe Ron uses the tried and true poly muffler for his grounding system.
Puts the muffler on the ground.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the same thing, though.
It might not be the same, but it got him on the air,
and that's what matters.
And you got to start somewhere, and that counts. So good going there, Ron. And I love the poly muffler. Atlanta 589, Don in Kennesaw was also in and out. And that'll bring us to Atlanta 403, Bobby at the Vortex.
Ground connections for him and bonding it into the major electrical system for the house, and I think it's something a little bit overkill for the attic, but I think you should buy a couple of cheaper lighting. That's probably so. I think that'll.
All right, Bobby. Well, that's a great thing that you helped Joe get his station set up and properly grounded. And we missed part of that. There's some interference on your signal there, but we got the gist of it, I think. So, yeah, the polyphaser can be an expensive purchase, but it is the industrial standard, and it's what you see in stations that are operating on mountaintops in all kinds of weather, 24/7 with very, very little interruption in service. I see it in a lot of railroad installations, and I also see it in commercial radio outside of railroad applications. Jeff had mentioned the, what's it called? The Alpha
Delta.
Alpha Delta, I think, is a high-quality amateur radio-oriented lightning protection device. And I don't know, I don't have any experience with the Alpha Delta, but I believe they run about 2/3 the price of the polyphaser. So that is an opportunity to save a little bit of money and still have a very good option for a lightning arrestor. When you're talking about the CB radio quality of lightning protection, I wouldn't even bother. I think you're just throwing money away. And if that's what you really want, I'll dig through my stash and see if I have a couple of them I can give to you, because they're really not worth having around.
Well, I think you bring up a valid point unintentionally. The polyphaser brand and some of the Alpha Delta ones are frequency specific. So make sure you get one that is rated for the UHF range that GMRS radio is operating in, and vice versa. If you're going to be getting a polyphaser for HF on the amateur side, make sure you're getting the right frequency range and not going to cause yourself a problem unintentionally.
And that's probably relevant with those inexpensive lightning arresters. They really may be suitable for 27 megahertz, and probably are no good at all in the 400 megahertz range. The polyphasers that I typically see on the railroad are rated from 0 to 1 gigahertz. So they really cover, they cover just about everything, because we've got radios at 900 megahertz. We've got radios at 220. We've got radios at 160. So rather than, because our guys would mix them up. So rather than produce that opportunity to put the wrong one in, we use that particular range so that.
And those are considerably more expensive than getting the frequency-specific ones from Polyphaser.
Are they?
Yeah.
I don't know if they are.
The 0 to a gigahertz are 50% more.
Okay.
They're a good amount more.
All right. Well, then I think those are what I've got here too, are the 0 to a gigahertz. So I've collected those at Hamfests, and I think Gary gave me one, and I purchased one online one time. I'll never do that again. But you can find these things without having to pay website prices, and just be on the lookout. And that's a great thing to look for. There's a Hamfest coming up, Jeff. Where is that?
In Dalton.
Oh, at the Dalton Hamfest. That's on February 24, I believe. Just a week or so away.
Yeah, a little over a week.
So, if you're looking for something like a polyphaser, I would go there.
And our friends at Chat Radio will be there too.
Yeah, and it's also a great place if you're looking for slugs for your bird meter. Hamfests are a great way to find those. That's how you build your collection. Just each time you go to a Hamfest, just buy one. And
bird meter. Did Chuck use that in Pigeon Forge?
He may have.
That's probably what it was.
I bet that is. All right,
Where
Bobby, did you have anything else?
Oh yeah, I lost track of where we were.
Chris.
I couldn't even much know what I'm getting into. But I guess somebody stepped on me halfway through my discussion there. So, but yeah, no, party was a real good tonight. So sounds good to me. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. WRAT 241 Atlanta 403 clear.
All right, Bobby, great to hear from you, and be sure to check out the YouTube live stream. Seems like it's a very popular thing these days. How many live stream check-ins did we end up with tonight, Mike?
Oh, I'm going to have to count those up.
Quite a few.
3.
All right, well, your counting will continue on. We just spoke with Atlanta 403. We're moving on next to Chattanooga 88, Christopher in Dayton. Christopher, did you have any comments for the net or any questions about grounding, bonding, or your antenna system? Christopher must have been in and out.
Yep.
I see 9 YouTube.
I've got 6 YouTube check-ins logged with the checkbox, but
we have a checkbox now?
Yeah, we do.
Where is it?
Column C, YT. But I think several of the members that you're seeing in there, like Dana, are on the log already.
No, I just didn't check the boxes.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's it. And Mike Barr, he checked into the logs on RF.
Well, let's get back on the air.
Okay.
All right, we're going to show Christopher as in and out and continue on. Next, we have Atlanta 454. Steve in Lilburn is in and out tonight, as well as Atlanta 453. Janine, also in Lilburn, in and out. And that'll bring us to Atlanta 250. Dana in Dahlonega. I understand Dana is watching on YouTube, so it's going to take him just a moment to pause the YouTube and scoot over to the radio and come on the air.
He just said he's not joining us on RF tonight. He's just on the stream.
Is that right?
That's what he says.
Well, his presence is requested. Is that a firm not joining?
Let's see if we can twist his arm.
Yeah.
Twist his antenna.
Well, I would like to know more about Dana's grounding system. at his station, his current operating position. He's using an HT, right?
I don't know.
Does Dana usually use an HT?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dana's going to stick to his guns, and he's going to stay on YouTube on the live stream. But I was hoping for an opportunity to talk about grounding with an HT. So, what the heck is that? How do you ground an HT? Well, it kind of happens automatically when you're using an HT. As you're holding that radio in your hand, and you press that PTT button, the energy within the HT will capacitively couple with your body, and you become part of the antenna system. So what does that mean, capacitively couple? Is that, do you have an explanation for that, Jeff?
It makes sense in my brain, but I don't know how to explain it so that others will understand it.
So if you have an idea of how a capacitor works, we'll do a little basic electronics here. A capacitor is basically two metal plates separated by a dielectric or an insulator. So you put energy on one of those metal plates, and that plate takes a charge. And so a capacitor can sort of act like a battery. And you can charge a capacitor up like you do a battery, and you can discharge that capacitor just like a battery. But it doesn't hold a charge for days or weeks. It holds a charge for moments. So that can be an inefficient battery. But the other thing that a capacitor does is in an alternating current is it can pass current. It can pass electricity. So even though those plates are insulated, you have electrons that will build up on one plate and electrons that will be removed from its adjacent plate as that current shifts back and forth. So those plates alternatively charge and discharge in synchronization with the frequency of the energy that's moving through that capacitor. And different values or sizes of capacitors can be tuned to resonate or charge and discharge at different frequencies. So your body isn't really all that tunable, but you still have enough of a range of electron motion within your body that radio can use that to capacitively couple to you, and you become part of the radiating element. It doesn't mean that you're being radiated with radiation. It just means that the radio is able to operate more efficiently while you're holding it than it can when it's sitting on a shelf. It has almost no effect on a receive, but in transmit, it can significantly improve the radio's efficiency. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I said that to Mike just to see if I'd get a charge out of him.
Yes.
Get a charge out of him. I see what you did there. Do you get it, Mike?
I get it.
Okay, good.
The electrons.
All right. Well, thank you for that question, Dana. I appreciate you participating tonight. Oh, wait. He didn't. Well, thanks anyway. And with that, we're going to continue on. We have Atlanta 289, Grady in Jasper. Grady, did you have any comments for the net tonight?
Yes, sir. Well, I guess more questions than anything. So I have just purchased the Comet 712.
I love that.
I'm going to be mounting it on a metal mast. Do you have any tips or tricks? Also, you spoke about grounding your coaxial via the ground wire, I guess it's in the coaxial. Can you elaborate a little more on that also?
So it sounds to me like you're doing just what we've done here. You're going to mount that Comet 7. I love that antenna, by the way.
I think we all do here.
Yeah. You're going to mount that to a metal mast. So the bracket that the 712 uses to mount with will bond to that metal mast. So effectively, you've created a ground path for that antenna to the bottom of the mast. So your grounding is really as simple as running a ground wire to bond that mast to a hopefully very nearby ground rod, wherever that mast reaches the ground. If that mast is not going to come to the ground, if it's going to rest on a deck, or if it's going to, not make it all the way down, then continue that path to ground with a ground wire from wherever it ends up at. That way you can continue that path to ground. So you have the bracket on the 712 mounts to that steel mast, and the conductivity of the steel mast will carry that ground current down to where you're going to bond to your ground rod. So hopefully that's a short run, but even if it's not, if your mast is going to stand on the deck upstairs or behind the chimney or whatever your arrangement is going to be, just get that thing grounded, and that'll take care of that. Now, the shield on your coax is also electrically at ground, which is good and bad. So the good part of that is that it will bring whatever else is connected to it to the same potential. However, in the event of a high energy lightning strike, even if it's nearby and not a direct strike, that's going to change fast. So the energy potential on that coax is going to end up being much higher because of the impedance of that coax. So it's going to push energy towards your radio. If your radio is grounded and has a low impedance path to ground, that's where it's going to go. It's going to follow that path, and it's going to come right back out of your shack. If it's not grounded, then that energy is going to follow every path to ground that it can find, and part of that path is going to be through the radio, which will turn parts of that radio into smoke. And it's hard to get the smoke back in once you've let it out.
Even with a smoke machine.
Did I explain that well?
Yeah, I think we need to break and reset, but I think the other thing he was asking was with regard to coax grounding kits. How do you ground the shield if it's coax? But we need to reset first. So we ground the shield of the coax with a grounding kit. The grounding kits are made for all different size coaxes, which would depend on what size you have or plan to work with. So if it's LMR 400 or half-inch Heliax or whatever the case may be, it's sized appropriately for the coax you plan to put it on. And how that works is you very carefully strip the outer insulation, aka the black plastic sheath, off the coax, and then you would go ahead and attach the ground kit to the shielding of the coax, which would make an electrical bond to that shielding coax. Then very carefully waterproof that connection, since you have just cut off the insulation from the coax, and waterproof that, and that allows you to ground the shield of the coax, and then your polyphaser should be grounding the center conductor of your coax. So you are giving both conductors in that coax a path to ground. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir, it sure does, and I appreciate the explanation. The good news is that my metal mast does reach the ground. It is buried in the ground, so hopefully that'll take care of me on that end. I do appreciate the information, and great night tonight, guys.
Go ahead, Mike. We got a bunch of in and outs.
All right, Grady. Well, thanks for checking in with us tonight. We're going to go ahead and move on. We had a string of in and outs after Grady. Atlanta 9-3, Brian in Lawrenceville was in and out tonight. Atlanta 810, what a dork, from Dawsonville, as well as 811, Atlanta 811 Victoria, and 810.5. Little John, the legend, were all in and out with us tonight. Although I think they were still monitoring, so they might be catching the tail end of this. Next was Atlanta 214, Tyler in Cumming, watching us on the YouTube channel tonight. Thanks for joining in, Tyler. Then we had Gainesville 285, CVT in Murrayville, and Gainesville 286, Lynn in Murrayville, both in and out with us tonight. Let's see, where's that leave? McDonough 22 next on the roster. Tim in Stockbridge. Tim, let's go to you for any questions, comments, or anything you'd like to share with the net regarding antennas and bonding tonight.
Well, good evening, gentlemen, and good evening to the net. This is probably the subject I know the least about, so this is a school class for me tonight in grounding. I'm just mostly listening and taking it all in. I did have a couple of comments just to illustrate how powerful lightning can be. When I was a kid, the house we lived in, the next door lot to us was all woods. It was undeveloped. And one night, I think I was about 10 or so, 8 or 9, 10 years old, we had a really bad lightning storm, and lightning struck a tree in the woods beside our house, probably about 15, 18 feet away from the house. And it knocked the power off in the house, and the next day when we got the power back on and everything, we noticed there was a lot of, on that side of the house where the lightning had struck, none of the light bulbs would work. The ceiling lights wouldn't work. The lamps, on the bedside tables wouldn't work. And when we went to unscrew the bulbs to change them, the light bulbs were all warped. They had melted and disfigured and disformed. They didn't break or burst, but they melted into weird shapes. It was the oddest thing I'd ever seen. I've never seen anything like it since. Also, just a few years ago, here at where I live right now, I'll take a short break. Where I live now, lightning struck a tree in the front yard about 15 feet away from the water meter that's near the street. And, of course, from the water meter runs the pipe where the water runs into the main house. And it wasn't even a metal pipe. It was some kind of ABS plastic or PVC or something. I'm not sure what it was. But lightning struck that tree. It's a big oak tree, and skinned it down on one side, dug a big gouge into the tree, and it went through the ground over to that water pipe, and it just exploded the water pipe for about 15 feet of length of that pipe had to be dug up and replaced. So that's my comments. Just if anybody doubts how powerful lightning is, I think it's really hard for the human mind to even imagine how much power is bound up in a lightning strike. Even the smallest, weakest lightning strike is just immensely powerful. My question for tonight will be bonding. You've been talking about grounding and bonding all night and how to ground this, how to ground that. I think I have a fairly good bonding means. I've dealt with, just the electric panels and stuff like that. But just to clarify in my own mind, and for those that may not know, exactly what is bonding? Is there a minister involved? Is there a marriage or anything like that? I'll throw it back to net control.
Oh, that goes right back to the question about lightning arresters and what kind of handcuffs do you use? Very good stuff, Tim. Yes, bonding is really just another word for connecting, and making a connection from one surface to another, from the surface of a wire to a ground rod, or from a cabinet to a wire, or from a desk or something of that nature, a metal object. If anything really that's large and metal in our Radio Shack, we should try to find a way to ground. So I think it was Chuck that had made mention earlier about how do you connect a number 6 wire to your back of your radio. And so that's a good point, because that's really not practical. I mean, if you had your radio mounted solidly in some sort of a rack, and you could affix that wire someplace in the rack, and then maybe work it over to where it could physically be connected to that radio, that might work. But the reality is that's just not practical, even in that scenario. The number 6 wire is heavy and stiff and hard, and our radio weighs a pound or so, And so it's just, if you go to move the radio around and you've got this rigid wire connected to it, it's not a practical thing to do. So in that case, any equipment that's in your shack, your computer, your power supply, your probably not your monitor because it's a plastic bezel all the way around. There's not really a good way to do any grounding there. But really any device that's in your shack that has a metal enclosure or a way to ground it should be grounded. And if that's just a matter of plugging in, its electrical cord with a 3-prong plug, if you have that option, do that at a minimum. And if you have a way to secure a ground wire to it, then do that. But what I've done in my shack is take an 18 or 24-inch length of braided wire and connect that to the number 6 copper, and then put an end on the radio end or the device end that makes sense. So use a crimp-on connector and crimp that. You don't want to solder in your grounding system because the solder could be a problem if you did take a strike. Crimp that splice connector, that ring terminal, that spade terminal, whatever it is that you choose to use, onto that braided wire, and then make that connection to your radio. That way you have a good low impedance path to ground. Don't let that braided wire be really, really long. You want it to be relatively short, but that's really the best way to connect your shack equipment to that big, heavy number 6, or if you can, number 4 is even better. Ground wire inside your shack.
If it's a permanent install, you can come into the house with that number 6 or number 4 and use some sort of a ground bus bar, and then come off the bus bar with the stranded wire to each device.
Yeah, I mean you can buy a bus bar at the big box stores, the red one and the blue one, orange one, whatever color it is. And just in the electrical system where the service panels are, you could use something like that. You could buy a ground bar from an electrical supply place. Those can be kind of expensive, but copper is better. And ultimately you want the fewest number of connections or bonds between your equipment and the ground rod that you can possibly make. But it's not practical, like I say, to run one wire from the ground rod into the shack and connect that to your radio and connect that to your computer and connect that to your power supply. That's just not practical. So we do have to make some compromises. In the end, the goal is to make the lowest impedance path to that ground rod that we can make. So that's a question I think that came up earlier, but hopefully that helps your understanding of how to build a base station at your house. What else do you have for us, Tim?
That's pretty much it for me tonight. So, like I said, I'm just listening and learning. So I'll send it back to you guys. Thanks a lot for the explanation there.
Shall we keep rolling?
Yeah.
All right, Tim. Well, thanks again for joining tonight. We'll keep rolling on down the list. Next, we had Atlanta 1-1. John and Canton was in and out with us tonight. Next, we heard Chattanooga 8-4. Jim and Hickson also in and out tonight. And that'll bring us to Atlanta 5-3-2. Tom and Flowery Branch. Tom, what questions or comments did you have for the net this evening?
He's usually in and out.
All right, I'll go ahead and mark him as such. All right, we're going to go ahead and show Atlanta 5-3-2 Tom as in and out. Next, we heard Atlanta 14-02 Todd in Artificial Sweetener Village. Is that what that says?
That's what it says.
Artificial Sweetener Village.
I don't know what that means.
All right. Todd was in and out with us tonight. Next, we heard Chattanooga 160 David in Chickamauga in and out
Yeah,
tonight.
so you can say it right.
Oh, I just heard
It's
it
only
enough
you
times.
that can't say it wrong.
Yeah, I got it all. I got it wrong 3 different ways tonight.
You tried. And that'll bring us to Noonan, 120 Carmine in Fayetteville. In with us tonight. Carmine, what questions or comments did you have for the net this evening? All right. Well, Carmine, we've got you in the log. We're going to show you as in and out. But if you are still listening, thanks for checking in tonight. We'll go ahead and move along to Atlanta 20. Michael in Cartersville. Joining us on YouTube was in and out. BR64 Melissa in Blue Ridge, also joining on YouTube, in and out. And Atlanta 658 McKay from Cumming, also watching on YouTube, in and out. And then we've got a string of in and outs, it looks like. Gainesville 417, William in Auburn. Gainesville 58, Jonathan in Oakwood. Atlanta 964, Richard in Duluth, in and out tonight. Gainesville 43, David in Auburn, in and out. Dallas 64, Josh in Dallas, in and out. Cades Cove 80, Eric in Rockwood, in and out. Atlanta 931, Scott in Canton, in and out. And Atlanta 32, Reggie in Snellville, in and out with us tonight. CW40, Robert in Nicholson, in and out. Toccoa 25 and Toccoa 26, that's Paul and Donald in Toccoa, both in and out tonight. Chattanooga 69, Ronnie in Las Vegas is in and out with us tonight. But I think he has an event tomorrow. Should we make another quick mention of the event?
That's lunch at Champy's. Did we ever figure out what time that is?
No, let's see if we can get Ronnie to at least confirm the time with us.
That's a good idea.
Chattanooga 69. Can you come back with time for lunch tomorrow?
WRKJ 453, Chattanooga 69. Good evening, guys. Great net tonight. I've got a notebook full of things written down here. Tomorrow's lunch is at noon. You was correct. It is at noon tomorrow at Champy's.
All right, noon tomorrow at Champy's. If you're in the Chattanooga region or willing to drive, that's the place to be tomorrow at noon. Thanks for coming back to us on that, Ronnie. We'll go ahead and move along. Next check-in we heard was Chattanooga 110, Jim in Ringgold. Wasn't sure if Jim was in and out, but let's give him an opportunity. Jim, if you're still with us, we'll take your questions or comments for the net. All right, Jim may have been in and out, so we'll go ahead and show him as that way. Chattanooga 49 was next on the roster. Robert from Dalton, in and out. And Atlanta 557, Ed in Kennesaw, was in and out with us tonight. Atlanta 637, Dave in Kennesaw, in and out. Gainesville 57, Richard in Westminster, South Carolina, in and out tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Atlanta 933, Dwayne in Canton, was in and out. And Dallas 290, Isaac, out in Dallas. Thanks for joining tonight. We've got you in and out. And that'll bring us to Atlanta 73, Ed in Lawrenceville, who is in with us tonight. Ed, what questions or comments would you like to share with the net this evening?
I will tell you about lightning and something else. I had an antenna mounted on a building 950 feet high on a mast another 30 feet up. The building was well grounded. Lightning hit the building, didn't hit the antenna, but the heat from the lightning melted the antenna and its mount, desordered it. So lightning does have other properties. Otherwise, y'all pretty much covered how to ground an antenna. My ground rod is inside the base of my mast, and is linked by a drilled pin. So it goes from 32 feet in the air to 8 feet into the ground. I think that takes care of it. And the antenna itself is metal.
You want to get that one? No.
I can. Well, good stuff there, Ed. It sounds like your mast is well grounded, and the antenna is well grounded as well with the mast. But don't forget, we need to give that energy room to dissipate as well, and create a little bit of a web through the ground so that as the energy comes down that mast, it has room to disperse into the ground. So while that is a great grounding start, let's not forget to give the energy some room to run, so to speak, through the ground, and give it a little bit of branching off of that and allow other...
Well, how do you do that? I mean, you're just going to drive a ground rod in the ground and the energy goes where it goes, right?
Well, if we drive additional ground rods in the ground and bond them all together, we're sort of, for explanation purposes, making what looks like a spider web, or fingers, if you will, and giving the energy branches to run on.
So there you go. And back to the commercial radio sites that I see, typically each leg of a tower will have 3 ground rods driven, 120 degrees apart around that leg of the tower. So if it's a 3-legged tower, it'll have 9 ground rods. And there's oftentimes a lot more than that, depending on what else is near that tower. For instance, if there's an ice bridge between the tower and the shelter, each leg of the ice bridge will have its own ground rod. So if there's 10 legs, you've got 20 more ground rods, because there'll be one on each side. And then the shelter itself will have a number of ground rods. The other thing that you'll see at some commercial radio sites is a sort of a wire mesh, kind of like fence wire, but it's not just cheap steel wire. It's a more of a stainless steel wire, and that'll be buried underneath the stone in a sort of a mat around that station. So it will typically encompass the entirety of the building and the entirety of the yard where the tower structure is at. And oftentimes that is also bonded to the fence around that structure, so that all of that stuff will assume the exact same potential if an event were to occur.
So
that's extensive. That's a lot more than we're going to do.
Yeah, we're not going to pick up our house and put mesh underneath the foundation, but ideally, in a perfect world, if you're starting from scratch, might be something to consider. But did you have anything else for us, Ed?
I'm not sure if this takes care of the dissipation or not, but you might take into consideration the ground rod is a 3/4 inch diameter tube that is sunk 8 feet in the ground, and that is in turn pinned to a 2-inch diameter mast. So between the contacts to the ground, I think it's got plenty of room to dissipate.
Well, that's very good stuff. And, I guess, well, here's the thing, is that every system, every station has to operate from what you have. And it's not practical for us to put a stainless steel mesh around our tower and drive in dozens and dozens of ground rods. It's just not practical or realistic for us to do as individuals, versus what a commercial location might have, where they can spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on the entire station. So you have to figure out what what you're willing and able and capable of doing. Something is always better than nothing. So wherever you start should be just that. That should be your start. But let's not settle on that. And once we've got our station established, we should always be thinking about what is the next thing that we can do. For instance, there's a number of folks tonight that checked in that sounded great. Their station sounds great. They come in loud and clear, just like Ed did. His station sounds fantastic. Full quiet, into the repeater. That's great. And there's a number of stations that came in that were really tough to read. And there's clearly more work to be done to improve those stations and make those stations sound as good as Ed's station does. But even at that, even at the studio here, there's always more. There's always the next thing. There's always the next big. What's our next big idea? Oh yeah, the log for events. There's always something that you can do to improve where you're at right now versus where ultimately your system needs to be. So that 3/4 inch ground rod or ground pipe is a great place to start. And as time and money and effort allows, there's no reason not to drive a couple more. Don't have to do it today. Don't have to do it this weekend. And you don't have to do it. But those are the kind of things that we always do to continue improving our station and to be better prepared for the event. Because the last thing we want is for a lightning strike or a significant event of even static electricity could do it, and we're not prepared for it. So, but yeah, everybody has to have something, and that's a great place to start. And ultimately, the goal again is establishing the lowest impedance path to ground that we can, and I think you've done that. So, very good stuff. Did you have anything else, Ed?
No, not really. The only lightning problems I've ever had came in on the telephone line and wiped out everything that way. So, never a problem with the radio.
And
with that, y'all have a good evening.
All right, good stuff, Ed. Another great reason to transition into the world of fiber optics. I don't think the fiber optics is going to carry much energy in a lightning strike, but who knows? All right, with that, we've got some YouTube check-ins here. We've got Atlanta 519, Gary in Marietta, checking in on YouTube. We have Cades Cove 70, Dwight in Tallahassee. Dwight was, did he say he was in
Mississippi, I think? Yes, still in Mississippi.
Still in Mississippi. Shuffling through the Texas sand, but my head's in Mississippi. And never mind.
Yeah, don't go down that road.
It just did. Atlanta 1415 1415. Timo in Atlanta checking in on YouTube. And Chattanooga 179. Brett in Chattanooga also checking in on YouTube. That's the end of our roster. So at this time, we're going to take one last round of check-ins, just one. And we'll also take questions or comments. If you'd like to make a comment, give us your TAC number and tell us a comment. We'll note that in log, and we'll come to you after the check-ins. So with that in mind, Net Control standing by. Any questions or comments, any late check-ins, the floor is open. Please call now. We wore them all out.
Yeah, is there nothing? Wow.
I really kind of thought we'd get Pamela, but she's probably not wanting to talk about grounding and bonding.
No.
Well, it's also 10 o'clock. We've been on the air for almost 2.5 hours. Just on YouTube, never mind early check-ins.
Right.
You got the script?
I do. All right. Well, I think this is a first that we've opened the floor for late check-ins, questions and comments, and got nothing. So I guess that means that everybody that wants to be in has made it in, and we've answered all the questions. So this was a great net. I want to thank every one of you for participating in the net tonight. And at this point, I'm going to say this concludes the North Georgia GMRS Regional Net. Tonight we had a total of
71
check-ins, including your net control operators. The net will now be returning the repeaters back to normal use. Everyone who signed in should sign out. I want to say thanks to every one of you for allowing us to serve as your net control this evening. Good night, everyone. This is Atlanta 946 WQYR 514. My name is Justin.
This is WRWM 344, Blue Ridge 63. My name is Mike.
And Atlanta 750, WRMR 367. My name is Jeff.
We are North Georgia GMRS Network, and we are clear.
Good night, everybody.